All right. So welcome everyone to the Furious Gravity anthology release and reading. I'm Vonetta Young, one of the contributors and board member of the Writer Center. I want to thank the Writer Center, especially our executive director, Margaret Melanie, for joining us here today on the internet. We would be at our beautiful facility in Bethesda, but you know, life happens. So I'm going to read a little description of Furious Gravity here for those who might not be familiar. Furious Gravity is the long-awaited 9th volume of the Grace and Gravity series, a literary journal devoted to women writers in the DC region. This volume is the second edited by Melissa Scholes Young, DC writer and associate professor at American University, who has taken over from founder Richard Peabody. Melissa has delivered a generous and vivid volume of 50 brilliant voices in which women write about the gravitational forces that bind them together or push them apart. Fury is useful fuel as they respond to a world they wish was more just. Amidst the darkness provided in generous and unrelenting doses by the current political environment, this collection offers a compilation of stories and essays with undeniable pull and, of course, grace. So we'll be taking questions from Melissa at the end, time permitting, so be sure to put those in the chat. And most importantly, you can find Furious Gravity at the book's website. You can buy a hard copy from Politics and Prose. You can buy the ebook from Amazon. Amy's putting that in the chat, I hope. You good? Okay, excellent. Want to give another shout out to the Writer Center. There's workshops going on from $25. Scholarships are available. There's also free craft talks, readings, and more. Check it all out at writer.org. And you can also donate to the Writer Center scholarships via the website, Venmo, or PayPal. So links for all of those things are in the chat, but please buy the book since that's why we're all here today. So we're going to get this show on the road. Our first reader today is Stephanie Dulli. Stephanie Dulli is an actor, comedian, director, writer, and survivor. She directed the live reading series Listen to Your Mother in DC for 6 years. Her writing has been featured in the Washington Post, CNN, Scary Mommy, Mamapedia, among others. She is currently in the final stages of completing her first novel, The Round Earth's Imagined Corners. Welcome, Stephanie.
You hear me okay? We're good? Yep. Okay, awesome.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Ravenous. Be nicer next time. My aunt, a believer in reincarnation, said as she leaned over her father's dead body at the funeral home. It was safe to say now that he couldn't respond. He looked like a wax doll, all coiffed and dressed in his coffin. I opened my mouth to speak, ever anxious to play the part of the imaginary, well-loved granddaughter, the one whose movie life played in my mind right alongside the actual experience, the relationships I envisioned myself to be in despite reality. I stood staring at him, so harmless and sweet, wanting to remember only the charm he had, the moments that he shone the sun on you. I wanted to say something befitting the moment, to honor him, to express my shock at the words my aunt had just let out into the world, even if they were true. All that came out was, I am not fat. Later, we sat in the formal living room of my grandparents' house, the one with the ancient china cabinet filled with treasures I was never allowed to touch, right next to the brushed aluminum and glass shelves from the 70s filled with iridescent abalone shells and old pictures of forced smiles. Seated on the nubby yellow couch, such a bright and hopeful piece in such a dark house, there we were, 3 of the 4 women he abused the most. My grandmother had passed a few years earlier, and we sat in her wannabe parlor, her perfume wigs and self-created Southern Belle persona still filling the room. Just us, her ghost, and his caretakers, his nurses. I almost giggled at how sickly Southern it was. My grandfather cared round the clock by these exceptional women, by those people, Bobby and Lacey, the only ones at his funeral. That last summer we were trapped with him on Galveston Island in the pink brick house. I spent every day with Bobby and Lacey. Lacey, who was quick to laugh, and when my grandfather, Mr. Benny, napped, she would paint my nails as well as her own in bright metallic colors. She had brilliantly complex hairstyles that changed weekly, and she never missed a chance to share her latest finds from the new Wally world. She made the simplest happenings into an epic tale. We would sneak into the humid garage to share stories and laugh together as the dryer droned on and on. She had a fire and a power in her joyful heart that I had never even been close to before. Every time she touched me, her long, bright nails sent that strength straight to my bones. Bobby was larger than life, in personality, body, and spirit. Bobby took no shit from no one, especially him, yet managed to make him laugh as she called out. It was a wonder to behold. "You're so mean, Mr. Benny. Even the old man's friend doesn't want to be your friend." And he would laugh his gummy laugh from the in-home hospital bed as he unwrapped another Hershey Kiss. Even pneumonia was scared of him. And while they fed and cleaned him, he teased Bobby that she was still as large as a house, that Lacey was too loud. Summer wrapped some of the best and worst moments in that little pink house that withstood so many hurricanes inside and out in a neat little time frame. I'd like to think he recanted his racist views in light of knowing them, but he was not kind. Not to them, not to us. "Watch out, you'll get fat." He wagged the butter knife at me, indicating the one scoop of mashed potatoes I had taken was clearly too large a portion. It was Thanksgiving, and I was seated at the right hand of my grandfather, who held court at the head of the table. Like any fatherless daughter, I was anxious to please, to have his approval. He poked my side with the knife. Not enough to hurt, but just enough that my stomach wobbled a bit. I felt my fat cells instantly swelling up, taking up too much space, making me unworthy. After the burial, in the living room, I lift a glass of wine to my lips, and just like that, I am standing near the large window in my grandfather's hospital room, sipping water. Trauma is like that. It skips time, memories moving like a quantum leap. It's a private room, one befitting an emotional tyrant. My mother is chatting with him, their voices a soft drone. "You better watch it," he hollers suddenly, snapping me back from watching the squirrel in the tree out the window. The squirrel watching me back. "You're gonna get fat. No man will want you." I am 23 and barely 100 pounds. I've been released not so long ago from a hospital, a short stay, and then in-home treatment to get me to eat, to keep something down. I am living on protein shakes. The panic when the thick vanilla cream hits my stomach is all-encompassing. Every sip, I feel myself expanding like a Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloon. I turn to face him, and from the depths of the empty shell of my body comes up a bubbling rage. It's short-lived, extinguished by his watery yet cruel gaze, but it's there. It's brewing. It's new. It grows as I have a panic attack at a restaurant, backed up against a stucco wall, feeling myself swell to a gargantuan size. It's the first time that I am eating out since the hospital. A friend who could have run for the hills but didn't stood with me, smoking a cigarette and squeezing my hand. He tells me to breathe, unwittingly and completely unaware that he is grounding me, bringing me back to earth from where I floated above. When I am solidly back in my body, my feet burn, connected with the earth and tied to the world. My rage brews again. I'm going to stay, I think. I'm going to take up space. I am playing Beatrice in Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. It's an outdoor production on the grounds of the Huntington Library in Pasadena, where the famous Blue Boy hangs on a wall and a Gutenberg Bible greets you as you enter. We banter back and forth, Benedict and I. Corseted and skirted, I feel safest, contained, covered, armored by my period costume and words well chosen for me. The breeze is soft as he kneels before me, and the leaves in the tree above us rustle as I say the very words that unleash me. I've said them before, and I will say them again, but this time, in this place, something breaks free. Oh, that I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace. So there.
Wow.
So I don't know how long that was. I don't want to go over, but I think that's a pretty good stopping place. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie. So powerful. And I have to say, I love that shirt so much. I bought it too.
Great minds.
Exactly. Thank you so much. All right. Our next reader is the venerable Amy Freeman. Amy's work has appeared or is upcoming in the Washington Post, Parents Magazine, HuffPost, Santa Fe Writers Project, Gargoyle Magazine, and many other publications. Her day job is as development director at the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Go ahead, Amy.
All right. Dog bitten. Just handle if he's not too scared. Sitting in a gray vinyl chair beside my 12-year-old, I ignored my ex's text and draped an arm over my son's shoulders. He tilted his head far to one side, away from the green dish towel swathing his left hand. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Did you hear back from Dad? Not yet, I lied. I'm sure he's busy. Like he was for all 3 meetings with my son's learning specialist and teachers, including a major one last week. And for the spring band concert and the roller coaster exhibit, the civil rights presentation, the multicultural festival, and yes, the birthday party. I always covered for him. Traffic must be bad. His boss can be a real jerk. Let's video the show and send it to Dad. Never. I don't know why he didn't show up. Or you'll have to ask him where he was, because my stomach clenched at the thought of how he might respond. Leaning back, I shut my eyes and snapped them open. I saw my son lying in the street, blood dripping by his wrist. He'd sobbed as 2 dogs snarled, their jaws locked around each other's necks. In the car, he couldn't stop jabbering about the lunging dog, and I couldn't stop telling him, he'll be fine, he'll be fine. Well, and maybe it wasn't quite that bad, but how would his dad know? All I'd texted was our youngest name, then dog bite, headed to the ER. He hadn't even asked for details before telling me to deal with it. I leaned over and kissed my son's temple, whispering, be right back. Bathroom, I'll be quick. I hustled off, shut the restroom door, and pulled out my phone, tapping out the messages I'd composed in my head since reading the text. Are you kidding? Get in the fucking car. After I sent that, I counted off 3 beats of chanting, show up for him, show up for him, show up for him, to make my ex think I was having second thoughts. Then I wrote, sure, you bet, I got this. I pocketed my phone, washed my hands, and returned to the waiting room. How's the hand? Chomped my dog, Mom, he said. How do you think? Sarcasm. The shock was wearing off. You hear back from Dad? No, yet. Not sure what's up. Can I use your phone? I cleared the texts and handed it to him. He looked at the screen. Oh, Dad's on his way. Great. Can you give me back the phone for a second? He did. Stop texting, I wrote. He's using my phone. We don't need him reading our messages. You need to be calm for him, he replied. Stop overreacting, Amy. Don't get hysterical. Here we are again. I was the banshee. He was the voice of reason, and the children were caught between us. Your father thinks, your mother says. Our youngest was a midlife surprise. Born a full decade after our other children. He was just a toddler when my ex announced he was tired of being a good husband, father, and son. He walked out the door as though he could opt out of our lives, which I guess he could. Was that when I started papering over his absences? I breathed in and out through my nose, focused on the rise and fall of my chest. I saw myself as I'd been after he'd walked out on me, curled on the side of my bathroom floor, tears dripping onto the tile, hoping the noise of the shower would keep my sobs from the children. I tapped out a message. He wants you to come and stop texting. I handed back my phone and returned my arm to my son's shoulders. With nothing to read, I watched the red second hand on a white clock tick off another 40 minutes. The double glass doors whooshed open, my ex strode in, navy suit jacket unbuttoned, his face at once familiar and a stranger's. What's the deal? Alice broke out of her collar and ran toward the Wilsons' dog. They started growling, so I tried to pull her away, my son said. Don't ever get between dogs. Let me see it. My son extended his arm, letting my ex unwind the dish towel. We both leaned in to look. My ex exhaled. I was at dinner with the Vietnamese trade minister. When I left, he was quite confused. Clutching my fists, I turned away. My son sat straighter. Dad, want to play Scrabble? My ex swiped at his phone and handed it to my son, who grabbed it with his uninjured hand. How long do you think we'll be here? He entered his word and gave the phone back to his dad. Triage said they fast-tracked him, I said. My ex typed in his word. Yeah, well, they're not going to rush him through for something that's not a big deal. My son shot a glance at me. I'm betting stitches, I said, folding my arms. 4. I say 4. Now that is not the end, friends. That is not the end. There are 2 more pages. I've run out of time, but you know what I would suggest? Buy the book. Buy the book. And spoiler alert, if you know my work at all, it's not going to end with sunshine and jelly beans. Thank you.
But it's going to be outstanding. Thank you so much, Amy. You had such a gift for gutting us. I love it.
You know, you're a concierge level friend, Vonetta. Happy to do it.
All right. Our next reader is Wendy Goodman. Wendy Goodman is a lawyer returning to writing creatively after 20 years of writing legally. Her writing has been featured in Hevria, the Otilio Review, and Two Sisters Writing and Publishing. A New Jersey native, Wendy lives in Kensington, Maryland with her husband and 2 teenagers. Take it away, Wendy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. And can you hear me? Is this good? Good. Okay, good. The toupee. Imagine a 48-year-old father of 5, the owner of a small business in a small town in New Jersey, leaves home one morning, mostly bald, for a regular day at the office. He returns home that evening with hair. It was December 1979. I was 8, my sister Sandy 18. We were lying on the white leather couch in the family room watching The Price is Right when our father walked in the front door and straight upstairs. A familiar sound from our parents' bedroom followed, yelling. "What is that thing?" my mother shrieked. "What in the world did you do?" My father came home from work just before supper, wearing a toupee. His wife friends wondered if he had had dental work. His customers asked if he had lost weight. The change was sudden, unexpected. Getting a toupee, like getting a facelift, should be a seamless and secretive transition. Wrinkles can't suddenly smooth out. Hair can't suddenly grow. One can't go from no bangs to bangs. It was a haircut in reverse. For my father, it was the beginning. My parents' marriage on the rocks. Maybe he needed hair, a symbol of youth, to imagine bachelorhood, to imagine starting over. For my mother, it was the beginning of the end. Their marriage on the rocks, further illustrated by him making a decision of this magnitude without discussion and screaming out to her, he's preparing for what or who comes next. For me, it was both. It was the beginning of shame, of this thing that made my father different, stand out, maybe laughed at. It was the end of not feeling that way about my father. I wasn't simply embarrassed. Everyday embarrassment would have been easy. I was oddly anxious about the awkwardness, the uncomfortableness of someone wondering if I knew, thinking maybe I didn't know. I know. How could anyone think I didn't know? That's the thing about a bad toupee. Everyone knows. I pretended the toupee didn't exist, that everything was normal. Like I pretended my parents fighting night and day didn't exist, that everything was normal. Like I pretended my father sleeping on the white leather couch in the family room the entire year I was 10 didn't exist, that everything was normal. Though also praying that when the school bus pulled into the driveway, no one could see him through the window there on the couch in his undershirt and boxer shorts and no toupee. I put all the shame I had, all the ways in which I felt different because of the frightening chaos in my house, into that toupee. I feared everyone on the outside could now see what I hid on the inside. I was no longer different only because of what I hid inside my house. I was also different because of what my father attempted to hide in full view. He was wearing his insides on the outside and mine right along with him. So I willed away the toupee, just as I willed away the yelling and screaming, as only a child's imagination can, leaving open the possibility that someone might wonder, does she know? Then, 30 years later, it happened, but not as I imagined. Mom, you know Grandpa Bert wears a wig, right? My 7-year-old son, Jonah, stood at the door of my basement office in blue and orange striped pajamas, wanting to share a story with me about his grandpa's, my father's toupee. Pausing to wonder, does she know? There was no awkwardness, no uncomfortableness, no judgment, only innocence and a simple question. You know Grandpa Bert wears a wig, right? We buried my father 2 years ago without the toupee. It was a decision, like all the other decisions we made during the 48 hours between his death and his burial. An easy one for us, his 5 children, to make. There in the casket, laid bare, his beautiful bald freckled head, the one I kissed, rubbed, and held on tightly to until I was 8. The one I caught only glimpses of over the last 4 decades, while he slept with the toupee resting on a lampshade, a blown-off baseball cap while he was on a boat or playing tennis, accidental exposure he quickly covered up. For the first time, I wish Jews had opened caskets, free of the angst, free of the embarrassment, free of the shame. I wanted everyone to see what I saw in that final viewing. It was him, purely him. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was gorgeous.
Thank you.
Really gorgeous. I will never look at a toupee the same way again. I think
Good.
I have a supernatural ability to be able to identify those things too. I will now look on them with new eyes.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Monique Hayes is our next reader. Monique writes poetry and short stories. She received her MFA from the University of Maryland, College Park, a Callaloo and Bona Fellow, also a Bona Fellow here, sorry. Her work has appeared in District Lines, Literary Mama, The Forum, and Revise the Psalm, and others. Welcome, Monique.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I think we can hear you. Try again. All right, let's try you again.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you now. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone. This is Contralto. My pen's missing, Renee, exclaimed a rattled, raven-haired woman who appeared to be 19. Only you could lose solid gold, Martha, said the blue-eyed brunette I assumed was Renee. Gloves are here, girls, called out a petite blonde who I didn't see coming up from behind. There should be a hat, Clarissa, shouted Renee. I offered a quiet greeting, but they tore the boxes out of my hands without responding. They were dressed in prim white dresses, sashes covering their curves. I found the receipt while Renee sifted through her purse for the payment. She held the dollars in her hand, yet she didn't place them in my palm. Your mother's such a gem, said Renee, very talented. Thank you, I said, my forehead wrinkling. And your family's so genteel, said Renee, sharing a nod with Clarissa. Understanding, added Martha, raising her head from the carpet to chime in. Unbelievably understanding, amended Renee. We always meant to talk to you, Annette. Amelia, I corrected her. Like Abigail Adams' first daughter, gasped Martha as she clapped. She shifted. I doubted I was related to any of the Adams, and they probably knew this too. Perfect name for someone who respects our tradition, said Renee. That incident with Marian Anderson, you weren't offended, were you? Martha discontinued her search to flank her solemn-faced friends. I saw their muscles tighten under their cotton dresses. and guessed that their teeth were clenched, even though their mouths were closed. They were finally paying attention to me, but it was simply to soothe their guilty consciences. Who do they think they are? I thought, putting all this pressure on me to pardon them. I squinted at Renee. She's singing at the Lincoln Memorial, actually, I said. Renee exchanged glances with Martha and Clarissa, then cleared her throat. Everything worked out for the better, said Renee. Would you help us locate Martha's pin before our meeting? If I had the money for Mama, I would have been on a bus bound for my music theory class immediately. I suppose the loyal customer deserved a few seconds. Martha and I almost bumped brows while we rummaged around the bureau. After 10 minutes, I straightened my skirt and stood erect. Gotta go, I groaned, touched on Tchaikovsky. I adore Sleeping Beauty, said Martha. Same here, I said. Plus, I want to get in some practice. Thanks for trying, said Martha. I bet you're a great gospel vocalist, guessed Renee. A glint of gold caught my eye after I rolled both of them. More of a concert pianist? Classical songs won't exactly impress them at the juke joint, will they? Asked Renee, refreshing her lipstick in the bureau's mirror. Renee, said a flushed Martha. What? Remarked Renee. That's where Negroes should perform. Churches, juke joints, and minstrel shows. Renee's mouth was rosy, growing increasingly crimson like the caricature on Daddy's invitation. My eyes detected the solid gold pin on the pale carpet. I thought about how Daddy left the remnants of the letter on our farmhouse's wood floor and went outside wordlessly. He couldn't drown out the ugly voices, so he walked into the undulating waves of a nearby river. Daddy did it and if he showed his anger, he wouldn't be seen as Gentile or acceptable. If he had been less polite, would he be writing music next to me? I know they wouldn't accept Louie in parts of Virginia, but I wouldn't let any voices make me vanish. I've got dreams I want to see play out. I retrieved the pen and threw it squarely at Renee's painted face. She screamed and clutched her cheek. You didn't want to give Marion a chance, did you? I exclaimed. Why else would your group banish the best contralto in the world? The best what? Asked Clarissa. It's her vocal range, I replied. The lowest female singing voice. And you three should feel mighty low. Renee finished stroking her face. You honestly expect us to do business with you again? Eleanor Roosevelt gives us plenty to do, I replied. Just as well, exclaimed Renee. Even if you were good, we don't hire temperamental artists. I swept the glove boxes off the vanity. The high-pitched chorus of cries was more than satisfying. Too small anyway. I'll go someplace where I can get a standing ovation. There were groans of protest, but they were muffled once I left the room.
Whew. I think I held my breath perhaps the entire time you read. Yeah, breathtaking was another way of saying that. I just used more words.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. All right. Our next reader is Donna Hemans. Jamaican-born Donna Hemans is the author of the novel River Woman and Tea by the Sea, which will be published in June 2020 by Red Hen Press. Her work has appeared in Electric Literature, The Rumpus, Volume 1 Brooklyn, The Caribbean Writer, Crab Orchard Review, Witness, The Millions, and Scoundrel Time, among others. She has won grants from Black Mountain Institute, Maryland State Arts Council, Millay Colony, and Virginia Center for Creative Arts in support of her work. Take it away, Donna. Also known as Unmute Yourself, Donna, in the virtual world.
Okay, I think I have. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, perfect.
Okay, good. This is a short piece from Father's Feet. You have your father's feet, Pearl says, and she touches Jacint's second toe. It's longer than the big toe, just like your father, she says. She rubs a mango-scented cream on Jacint's feet, her hands moving slowly, her fingers tickling the wrinkled soles without meaning to. Jacinth takes a dollop of the orange cream, rubs some on her chest. She's quick, but Pearl moves just as quickly to wipe away the excess cream and rub the remainder into her daughter's skin. At last, Jacinth stands up. She's lightly scented now. It's her job to close the jar. She spreads her fingers and twists the cap, sealing away the scent. Her thin body gives no hint of the woman she'll later become. She steps into a white panty, blue pajamas, and mismatched socks. Without hesitation, she runs from the room, as quick as a breath released, to her father sitting motionless in the living room. Jacinth climbs onto his lap, her short legs partially filling the space where his legs would have been, tucks his arms around her body, and settles her head under his chin. She feels guilty about taking her father's feet, so she kicks her legs and the thin blanket lying on her father's lap, but he doesn't shift at all. She falls asleep there, her thumb in her mouth, her legs still, and dreams of a man's feet attached to her legs. In the dream, the feet fall off. She runs left and the feet follow her too. She wakes up screaming and apologizes to her father for taking his feet. "No, no, you didn't," he says, and explains as best as he can why doctors sometimes take limbs. He leaves out the pertinent details, the remains of the motorcycle, mangled metal and leather seats, coming to much later and recalling his car hurtling toward the black mouth of a cave set deep in a roadside cliff along Queens Highway. He lived, two didn't. Sometimes the body betrays itself, he says. She nods, doesn't ask what the last thing he says really means. She's 4 years old, a schoolgirl, and though she doesn't yet know the meaning of betrays, she finally understands that having her father's feet isn't the reason his legs are cut off at the knees. The dolls are side by side, both painted with a hint of cocoa, one thin and with the hint of a woman's body, the other with the plump roundness of a baby and a soft cloth midsection that merges with plastic legs and feet. For the tea party, she chooses her newest doll, the baby, discards its white plastic shoes and squeezes the doll's soft cloth middle. Jacinth and the new doll she names Hyacinth sit on the floor, each with a single banana chip on a napkin spread out in front. Her father sits in his wheelchair and his single banana chip on a napkin on his lap. It's Jacinth's ordered world, disrupted at 5:30 with her mother's return and the bustle of pots and plates in the kitchen. Jacinth and the doll Hyacinth move first to a corner of the kitchen and then to the bathroom where she continues her exploration of the doll's body. The pink lip color is already peeling off and the legs and arms move too freely in the sockets. The hair, jet black and straight, nothing like her braided curls, begins to frizz when she sprays it with the mixture her mother puts on her hair. When Pearl returns to the bathroom, the doll is dripping water onto the floor, and Jacinth is in a puddle, her shorts and t-shirt wet. They turn away, Jacinth to peel away her wet clothes, Pearl to ready the towels and the soap. The doll floats in the water, and when Jacinth returns, she sees one brown plastic leg floating separately in the bath water. Jacinth tries, but fails to press the leg back in place. She tries again, but the leg refuses to slip back into place. Jacinth also falls to the floor, tears in her eyes, sorrow and frustration bubbling together. She's 5 years old, too young for the grim lesson, but understanding with absolute clarity a body's potential to betray. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
If I could be that gifted to write the level of detail, I mean, I think we were all just like, we are transported. Absolutely magical.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next reader is Beth Kanter. Beth Kanter's essays and articles have appeared in national newspapers, magazines, and online publications. She has written 6 books about Washington, D.C., including No Access, D.C., Great Food Finds, D.C., and Washington, D.C. Chef's Table. Beth leads narrative writing workshops and was awarded the 2019 James Kirkwood Literary Prize for her novel in progress, Paved with Gold. Welcome, Beth.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great, okay. Funneling hope. I sat at my kitchen table unsure of what to write. Nothing clever or overly profound came to mind as it had before. So I settled on Never Again Is Now, a hashtag attached to the protest I was about to attend. When it came time to affix my latest handiwork to the box top turned makeshift sign backing I had been keeping for this purpose these past 2.5 years, I noticed the once thin slice of cardboard had grown heavy with words, my words, Words carried to marches, vigils, rallies, hearings, and protests. Words that showed solidarity, sympathy, support, and outrage for everything from women's rights to gun violence prevention, to Supreme Court nominees, to remembrances of synagogue massacres. Words I literally and figuratively have tried to hold up since January 20th, 2017. And on that human morning, words that helped me realize what I had lost: hope. I was devoid of hope. Somewhere between the last sign and the new one, I had become like that overused piece of corrugated cardboard, frayed at the edges and starting to buckle beneath the weight of what I strove to support. While I was committed to participating in the day's Never Again action demonstration at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement headquarters, I arrived convinced that my participation would not change these feelings. But to my surprise, on that almost 100-degree Washington, D.C. day, that's indeed what happened. By the end of the afternoon, a sliver of hope had found its way back to me, and a small white kitchen funnel is what brought it back. The first one I noticed was tucked into a Velcro loop on the strap of a volunteer's backpack. Its owner, one of the people charged with helping to keep us hydrated, particularly those who form the human chains blocking the roads to and from the large office building. They stood for hours on one of the summer's most aggressive days, heat rising up from the asphalt below and the midday sun beating down on them from above. For the next 5 hours, water bottles and cups were filled and refilled over and over and over again, quickly and efficiently, thanks to the funnels and their owners. I saw in it a small but perfect premeditated act of kindness. I imagined the layers of thought behind the system and how the group chose to take on and embrace the responsibility of caring for one another in this way. The volunteers must have made dozens of water runs that day, to where I'm not even sure, but they kept arriving back with cool water. The funnels made sure not more than a few drops were wasted, and in a small yet meaningful way, this act began to fill some of the emptiness I carried with me that day. Perhaps because on a basic level, it modeled kindness and caring. The funnel brigade demonstrated a behavior that so many of us longed for, and on that day tried to demand for our immigrant and asylum-seeking neighbors and fellow humans. It showed what it's like not just to talk about taking care of one's neighbor and the stranger, but what it looks like when you start to do it. And showed us they did, through an ongoing parade of sunscreen, granola bars, and spritzes from spray bottles, through regular check-ins and chats, through a cold Gatorade and Mandarin orange run somewhere around hour 4. At a time when basic human kindness and connections have been scrubbed from our political discourse, these acts were more refreshing than the cool water. Against the horrific background of family separations, racially motivated violence, and the death of children in detention camps, somehow these small offerings unexpectedly connected me to the magnitude of what had been lost. So for now, as the seasons change and the news cycles swirl, I remember that I once was temporarily bolstered by those who offered me water when I was thirsty and a drop of hope when I was parched. Some days are harder than others. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Beth, I should probably report you to the FBI for listening into my therapy sessions, but you just articulated things much better than I ever could. The sense of, I don't know how you've made that sense of hopelessness beautiful, and just, I know I can't be the only person who felt very seen by that, and also deeply convicted for not doing more.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, our next reader is Maggie Nye. Maggie Nye is a writer, editor, and teacher from Maryland. Her fiction and nonfiction have appeared or are forthcoming in Passages North, Hobart, Pleiades, Smoke Long Quarterly, and elsewhere. She is the former writer-in-residence at St. Albans School in DC and has a novel in progress about a girl gang, a golem, and Leo Frank. Take it away, Maggie.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Excellent.
Good, okay. My essay is called Keeping Watch, and here's the book teaser here. The summer before my final year of graduate school, my mother and I took a trip to Spain. It was the first time we'd left the country since my brother's death. During summers, I always went back to Maryland, my home state, and lived in my mother's house. This was the last time I would call my mother's house my home. On our way to Madrid, we changed planes in Istanbul. In the restroom at the Ataturk airport, 3 little girls in mint green pants, none of them taller than the latch, pressed their ears to the door of a stall. 2 girls scraped at the door, and the tallest shushed them with a finger to her lips. The middle girl squatted down to gather evidence from the gap beneath the tall stall door. All 3 listened solemnly as the toilet flushed. I have told this story many times to friends in search of what I want it to mean. One friend, a kindergarten teacher, says young children are desperately curious about the things their parents do in private. The woman who finally emerged wore a black abaya and niqab, not uncommon for women in the Gulf states. Except for her hands and a 6-inch slit for her eyes, she was covered from head to toe. All 3 girls stared up at the woman with identical awe. The youngest girl, still negotiating her relationship to gravity, lost balance on the wet tile and slipped, but the woman's hand darted out and caught her just under the elbow. The speed of the woman's reflex jarred the black fabric of her niqab loose, revealing a small stretch of jaw that doubled her visible skin. All 4 of us looked, and I felt a little guilty spying something she had worked so hard to conceal. The way I imagine it, the girls felt a wave of relief seeing this small undressing. They could finally lay their investigation to rest, knowing their mother was not lost after all. Their fear was that she might have been like a Mexican cascaron, a trick egg with the yolk drained out that, if you picked away a little of the shell, you'd discover was only filled with confetti. When I explained my theory to another friend, she disagreed. The girls were probably used to seeing their mother covered up, she said. They would have known her in other ways, by how she moved, how she smelled. I keep telling this story to my friends, hoping one of them will reflect my own understanding back at me. I don't know why people are more comfortable with lost than dead. A month later, that same airport was targeted by a Chechen extremist. The paper reported that 45 people had lost their lives, which is a misleading way to say they died, as though their lives may one day be found again under a couch cushion. I think about those girls often. The trip was my mother's idea. She loves travel and everything that goes along with it. The novelty of other people, other food, other customs, the spontaneity enabled by time designated as leisure. As a child, I was fearless and good-natured. I introduced myself enthusiastically to strangers and performed elaborate song and dance routines for an audience of Safeway shoppers. If I had grown in a straight line from infant to adult, I would have made the perfect travel companion for my mother. I sometimes think she forgets I didn't, that she is interacting with a wishful version of me that never grew into the sullen, rigid homebody of my adult years. I'm a very bad traveler, but I went. I knew it would make her happy, and from the moment we left the airport, I wanted to return. It was the kind of homesickness inappropriate for adults, a kind of homesickness that was like a real sickness, like home nausea, home flu. There was no curing the sickness because the home that would have been its remedy doesn't exist, not in the way I needed it to. It was my childhood home on Diotis Road, but in perpetual summer. The juice of fallen mulberries staining the ground in black rings around the trees, melted cookies and cream spilling from a cone down my brother's arm onto his white shirt, our mosquito bites bleeding. Here, my brother is still alive, never older than 18. Even then, he wasn't well. Even then, neither was I. But my fantasies are free from illness. In my mother's real home, the large serving spoon with its burnt black bowl has gone through so many washes, the ghost of my brother is almost clean from her drawer. Sickness, I told her, was why I wasn't eating at the cafes and Toscas where I ordered only coffee and wine. The truth is that I was trying to make myself disappear. Over the course of our trip, I formed the strange idea that if I did, I might be sent home, to the summer brother home of my fantasy. As the idea gained purchase in my mind, I began to feel that affection and touch were insidious gestures, as if the contact was the thing binding me from the disappearance I sought. A rational explanation might be that I didn't see myself as affection-worthy, but it would be more accurate to explain the feeling as an instance of affection intolerance. At the same time, I grew interested in observing other people's affections. In Madrid, 2 gamine teenagers in cut-off shorts held hands in front of a pond at El Retiro Park and kissed like their mouths were made of starlings. In Cordoba, a couple braced tightly together, like a young girl walking on her father's shoes but turned back to front. The man slipped his hand under the woman's short striped skirt. And on a bus to Barcelona, a man a little older than me laid his head in the lap of the woman beside him. She touched his hair like his mother or his lover, that kind of gentleness. The more I watched, the more certain I became that I was not merely intolerant, but somehow inhospitable, that some compound inside of me could not allow affection to thrive. By the end of our trip, my suspicion was a full-blown phobia that kept me awake at night. In the hotels where my mother and I shared a bed, I was so afraid our bodies might accidentally touch in the night that I hardly slept. When I did, I dreamed of my brother. Okay, I think that's probably enough for now. The only good part's the end, so you have to buy the book.
Oh my God, the only good part oh my God, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because all of that was incredible. Check the comments, because so many people have all of these amazing lines that they couldn't help but repeat. And I am just like, if this were, plagiarism were not a good thing, I would take all of these lines for myself.
Thank you, everyone.
So good. So good. Okay, our next reader is Alice Stevens. Alice Stevens' debut novel, A Famous Adopted People, was published in 2018 by Unnamed Press. She is a contributing editor to Bloom and writes book reviews and a column, Alice in Wordland, for the Washington Independent Review of Books. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're all good.
Okay. Withering Heights, with no apologies to anyone. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, Heathcliff had assured her. Ever since he had found out that Catherine was afraid of heights, he had insisted on curing her of it. And because she loved him so very much, she went along with it when he took her to the top of the Washington Monument, every story that the creaky elevator ascended like a lash to her back as she clasped clammy hands together and counted from 1 to 10 over and over again. At the top, he forced her to look out from every window, exulting over the fine view while she gritted her teeth and kept her eyes firmly pointed at the sky, delft blue with a fine draping of gauzy clouds. While Heathcliff pointed out the Pentagon, the White House, and every single Smithsonian museum his eye could see, Catherine followed the airplanes as they skimmed by at eye level. Finally, just as Catherine thought she would retch with cold panic at not having solid ground beneath her feet, Heathcliff relented and they descended back to earth, her heart returning to its regular steady rate, her palms tacky with the residue of sweat. And that, Catherine thought, was the end of that. But it wasn't. For their first wedding anniversary, Heathcliff surprised Catherine with a trip to Las Vegas. Waiting till you see our room, he bragged as they were checking in, the scarlet carpet plush beneath their feet, the foyer dazzling with gilt and marble. When the bellboy pressed P on the elevator, Catherine balked. Heathcliff, she warned. I saved up all year for this, my love. He squeezed her upper arm reassuringly. She hated it when he did that. It reminded her of the unsightly fat bear. To show you how much I adore you, how I live only for you, I booked the most expensive suite in the hotel. She stabbed the open door button and held her finger there. Heathcliff, either you change our suite to a floor no higher than the 3rd, or I'm going home. She knew Heathcliff was furious by the way he refused to talk with her that whole evening, stubbornly staying mum even when David Copperfield sawed his own self in half, and she turned to him, exclaiming in amazement. Heathcliff looked stonily ahead, leaving immediately after the show for their standard double room on the 3rd floor, while she had a few lonely Long Island iced teas at the bar. The next morning, though, Heathcliff shook her awake bright and early, room service breakfast already delivered. I planned a fun, once-in-a-lifetime excursion for us, he grinned, kissing her on the neck. We're going to the Grand Canyon. Relieved that Heathcliff was no longer annoyed with her, he could be so damn moody, Catherine kissed him back, and their breakfast went uneaten. They made it onto the tour bus just as it was about to leave. Exhausted from the fighting and the making up, they both fell into a deep sleep, waking only upon arrival at Bright Angel Point. Everyone dutifully left the chilled comfort of the tour bus for the baking heat of the Arizona desert, filing up the dusty trail to the lookout point. As the path began to climb more steeply, the familiar cold coiling of fear choked Kathleen. "You go on without me," she ordered Heathcliff. "I'm going back to the bus." "No way," Heathcliff laughed, cupping a hand. "What doesn't kill us makes us stronger." "Let go of me, Heathcliff, or I'm going to scream," Catherine hissed, twisting violently to get out of his grip, her fear of heights superseding her fear of making a scene. The other tourists mostly plodded by, but a few stopped to watch them, as if this was just another sight for their entertainment. "You're making a spectacle of yourself," Heathcliff muttered, pulling her off the path. "You're the one making the spectacle," Catherine yelled, whipping her body back and forth. Okay, I'll let you go, Catherine," Heathcliff said. "Just promise me you'll go up to the edge here and take a quick look down. Nothing will happen to you, I swear. Do you agree?" Catherine agreed. Holding her hand lovingly in his, Heathcliff walked her to the lip of the canyon. She inched forward, but glimpsing the great yawning chasm of empty space open up at her feet, she dropped his hand and stepped back. Heathcliff reached to pull her forward again, and she pushed him away, hard. He stumbled back, his heel slipping down the rocky ledge. He looked at her with a surprised smile, and then fell backward into the great void. As Catherine screamed, "Heathcliff!" she remembered another great fear of hers, losing Heathcliff. She would have flung her body after his, but the thought of the height and the plunge made her fall to her knees and vomit in the dust instead. The end.
I meant to unmute myself, and I was laughing really hard. That was so amazing. And I kind of just want you to make an audio story, because that was remarkable. The voices were, that just took the story up to 11.
I've been practicing my Heathcliff. I kind of wanted him to be like a stoner sort of, dumbass.
Oh my gosh, that was so perfect. I can't, we have one more reader, but can I just say, I cannot wait for USPS to finally send me my book so I can read all of these over again. All right, our last reader is Kathleen Wheaton. Kathleen Wheaton is president and managing editor of Washington Writers Publishing House and the author of Aliens and Other Stories. Take it away, Kathleen.
Six. He'd forgotten that Europeans call the ground floor 0.
Oh, wait, hold on, Kathleen. I think you might have started before you were unmuted. Do you mind starting over again?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Correction. The 5th floor apartment Blazer had rented in Madrid was actually on the 6th. He'd forgotten that Europeans call the ground floor 0. It was a handsome pre-war building with a wide curved staircase. Next week, we install the elevator, the landlady said, as he paused on the landing marked, wrongly he felt, cuarto, 4th. Next week we'll be gone, Blazer panted. He adjusted his grip on the bags. Honestly, I can carry mine, his wife Julie said. She was also 56, but lean and wiry. She was training for a half marathon. No, I'm balanced. On the floor designated quinto, 5th, Paloma, the landlady, unlocked a massive oak door and they entered a windowless hallway. One large flat had been broken up into 3 apartments. The middle one, the best, Paloma had assured him by email, was theirs. Still, Blazer felt apprehensive as she opened apartment B. Julie could be particular about details he hadn't noticed. To him, the place looked pretty nice, smallish, but with high ceilings trimmed with plaster garlands. In the bedroom, a fluffy white duvet appeared to hover above the bed. Julie stepped through French doors onto a balcony and turned around, beaming. Es perfecto. She was a copy editor who'd recently become a little famous. Her grammar handbook, an unexpected bestseller. In TV interviews, her crisp pronouncements induced laughter, but try living with a perfectionist for 30 years. She was a good person, of course, and the children had turned out well. Blazer had stopped predicting they'd rebel against her impossible standards. In Madrid, however, Julie lolled in bed past 6:30. She exercised only incidentally on their long walks around the city. She abandoned her restrictions on caffeine and sugar in favor of frequent stops for espresso and gooey pastries. The mellower she became, the more anxious he felt. On their final evening, they had dinner on the balcony, a bottle of Rioja and takeout tapas from the bar downstairs. "I have something to tell you," Blazer said. Part of his brain said stop, but the tipsy part said, go for it. "I've met someone." "Very funny. Whom, Paloma?" "It's my mentee at the office, Dakota. I've mentioned her." Her smile vanished. "Indeed, you've mentioned your mentee?" This was the Julie Blazer who had audiences in stitches. "I'm serious. We're moving in together when I get back." She stared at him. "How in hell do you expect me to sit next to you on a plane for 7 hours after this announcement?" "I've upgraded you to business. I'm going to take care of you, Julie." "So that's what this vacation was about," Julie said. "You're upgrading." She stood and walked to the bedroom and closed the door. He sat at the table with his head in his hands. At last he rose, cleared and washed the dishes. He tried the bedroom door, locked. "Go away," Julie said. "You're not going to hurt yourself, are you?" "I never have." Blazer sat down on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the door. At dawn, she emerged, great dark circles under her eyes. Even after childbirth, she hadn't looked this awful. His heart broke. "I proposed this trip to give us one last chance," he began, "and it's worked, Julie. Dakota's spontaneous, fun-loving, sure, but she's not you. I only wish I hadn't said anything. I've texted her, it's over." He held up his phone as proof. "Never again, I swear." Julie said nothing. But when the landlady knocked, Julie greeted her cheerily. Soon she and Paloma were laughing, which gave him hope. The women kissed adios. "Adios," Paloma told Blazer. "What was so hilarious?" he asked Julie. "She said to be sure to take out the garbage so it doesn't stink up the apartment," Julie said. "The elevator construction will take a week." I guess that's funny in Spanish. They packed in silence. Julie went out first with her suitcase. Propping the oak door with her foot, she called to him, "Hand me the trash bag, I'll carry it to the landing." Blazer came out with it, but before he reached her, Julie let the heavy door slam, then turned the skeleton key. "Hey, I'm still in here." "I appreciate the upgrade," Julie said through the door. He rushed back to the apartment. The air current caused by his movements pushed that door shut. His suitcase and phone were still inside. He stood in the dark hallway, listening to the clunk, clunk, clunk of Julie's case descending the stairs. After a long while, his fists aching from pounding on the oak, he heard hammering, drilling, the blows of sledgehammers on ancient stone. In a week, maybe less, they'd surely reach the 6th floor.
That is phenomenal. Oh my gosh, that's so great. It does immediately remind me of the Beyonce song, Upgrade You. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. That's phenomenal. That is all of our readers. They were all amazing. And like I said, I cannot wait to actually get my book so I can read all of these fantastic stories again. Thank you, every single reader. I'm actually going to read their names again, just so you remember their names and go read them, their stories again. We had Stephanie Dulli, Amy Freeman, Wendy Goodman, Monique Hayes, Donna Hemans, Beth Kanter, Maggie Nye, Alice Stevens, and Kathleen Wheaton. So take a bow, ladies. And next, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A if we have questions with Melissa Scholes Young, the editor, and Amy Freeman, development director of the Writers Center. Thank you all again so much for reading. It was absolutely amazing.
Those are fantastic readings. I feel like a proud mama because Wendy and I have been carrying these stories around in our head for almost a year now. And it's so exciting to hear, to share them with everybody. Like I'm marching like a kid into kindergarten and I just know how amazing they are. And I know everyone else will think they're amazing. I'm so happy to see your voices. Hear your voices and see your faces. And thank you, Vonetta, for being our MC extraordinaire, and Amy for organizing us and putting all this together, bringing us all together. I know it's harder these days to be together, but it's important.
So I guess, thank you, Melissa, Wendy, Richard Peabody. I didn't see if you were here or not. So I'm actually feeling really overwhelmed. There's something about the intimacy of this event that, as I wrote, I'm not crying, you're crying, which is what kids say. So let's keep this, because what we could do in person is a little bit, let's keep this to like 10, 15 minutes of questions for Melissa. If you want to pop some in the chat message, go ahead. And in the meantime, I'm going to start you off, Melissa, and saying thank you. Did I say that again? Thank you. And thank you. But tell us your journey with Grace and Gravity. How did you find it? How did it find you? How did you become this?
I actually think we need to unmute Wendy for this story.
Go for it.
Vonetta, can you unmute Wendy as well? Because Wendy and I may have different versions of this, but as I remember it, it was at my house.
Yes.
It was at my house. It was very, very late. And
Melissa had had a little bit to drink.
Shocked.
It was at my house. And right after an election, you all might remember, I was feeling really devastated, mostly for my daughters. And I had no answer except to gather all the poets that I knew and bring them to my house and make them stand up and read to me in my living room. And we played music, and we called the series we called it
Art in Dark Times.
Thank you, Wendy. You can see why I need Wendy to do everything. Art in Dark Times. And Richard was there, and Karan Martinez was reading, and Richard, after Karan had read, told us that the series was ending, that he had been publishing it for a decade, and yet it wasn't really sustaining itself. There wasn't really a market for it, and though he enjoyed it, he felt that maybe he wasn't the right person to continue to edit a series that was growing about women's voices. So I said, I want it. It just burst out of my mouth. I want it. And he said, take it, do with it what you will. And he was very excited, but he was also, I think, happy that it was going to live on. I, at that point, didn't really know what it was going to look like. So like I do with everything I don't know, I just start. I'm Midwestern in that way. And so I just started. And Grace and Darkness, we published in 2018. And then this is, of course, the second volume I've edited. And it just keeps getting better. The community around it, the energy, the stories, they just keep getting better. I wish we could publish every single story and essay that we get, but we get a record number as more and more people hear about this series. So that's it. Wendy, did I miss anything important?
I want to add one thing, and that is that Richard had gone through 8 volumes, had published 8 volumes. Melissa made 2 incredibly important contributions or changes. I shouldn't say just 2, but 2 of the most visible things that I think Melissa brought to the series, aside from her just wonderful, delightful self. First, she included creative nonfiction, and for someone like me, who writes exclusively nonfiction, I really appreciated that. And the other thing that she did was to create a production class at American University to have her students work hands-on in terms of marketing, editing, everything behind the scenes. I have visited her class. It is truly an amazing thing to see how much this handful of graduate students is able to accomplish. So I know, the first volume that Melissa published, Grace in
Darkness. I was thrilled to be a contributor for, and then I am very, very grateful that she asked me to join as a nonfiction editor, because it was truly a delightful process to read submissions every week and sit down with Melissa and talk about them. And as you can see, we were pretty much panning for gold and really, really hitting the mother lode. So.
Wow. I have two questions connected. Number one is what do you look for in submissions, both of you? And number two, and this is not my question because I only write limericks, but I've had people ask me whether you're thinking of taking poetry, and my dog is going to come in, so talk really, really loud for a second.
I look for a story. I just love being swept away by a story, and I look for a voice. Wendy and I both read every single piece that was submitted, and then we would talk about them in batches of 10. When Richard turned the series over to me, he said, listen, don't try to edit. You can't edit every piece. There's too many stories. And I have not followed his advice at all, because I find the teacher in me, many of you are laughing because you're like, that's right, you kept emailing me like so many edits, and it was not funny. But the teacher in me sees what you're trying to do and understands, I mean, that it's my job and Wendy's job to make the story be the best story you want to tell. And so if that means going rounds and rounds, that's what it means. And so I do edit it a lot and am very hands-on with every story. And so I just love a story. I really do. And I also, I read every story because some stories get better, right? And some stories, and I don't want to miss an amazing ending just because I stopped reading after a few pages. So I read everything and I want everything.
She does. She does. It's very difficult to try to contain Melissa. We finally had to cap at 50. She is such a generous writer. She really does want to promote other women and other voices. And I'll add to that we always read submissions blindly. We did not know whether we were picking up a short story or an essay. And so that voice and theme are very, very important. And I think that you had a fabulous sampling today of that combination. And I will also admit one thing, and that is there are certain pieces in this collection, I'm not sure whether they're creative nonfiction or fiction. And I think that is a tribute to people's work.
It's amazing. And Wendy is so good at her expertise is the nonfiction, and we wouldn't have been able to accept as much nonfiction without Wendy stepping in and going through every piece together. But I don't always worry about the distinction. A story is a story is a story. And so I was happy to accept anything that told a great story. I do love, as so many of these pieces today you can tell that I love something that makes me laugh. And my favorite is when a story, I'm crying and weeping, and then I get a gut punch of laughter. That's my absolute favorite story.
Well, I would be happy to stay here all afternoon, except that it's my job to wrap things up. So I'm going to ask both of you, and I'm going to throw in the links again to buy the book, hardcover, go to the website, go to the Writer Center, give us money for scholarships so we can help people who are stuck home who don't have the money for workshops. So my last question to you, and then I'm just going to disconnect and weep because this was so intimate and beautiful to me, is what's next for this series? Or for you, as you prefer to answer it.
And can I add one thing to that? Will you?
Add 7 things to that.
Will you start considering poetry? I'm not a poet and I know it. However, I do know quite a lot of poets.
I know enough to know what I'm not good at. So I'm welcoming of poet, but we will need more help. Because don't know that I'd be the right person to edit poetry. And so I'm open to anything. I love being surprised. I don't really say no to much in life. I just say, yes, let's figure out how to do it. I have no idea. Let's start. And we will absolutely publish volume 10, and it will be amazing. My plan is for that to come out in 2022. That's when I'll teach the literary editing and publishing class at AU. And I agree with you. The class is amazing. It's wonderful. It is the class I wish I had had so much when I was an MFA student, because it seems that we don't talk much about the business behind writing. And that's all this class does. We study books and we invite all the DC literary editors in of journals, and they learn from them. And then the last month we turn around and say, okay, everything we've learned about editing and publishing, here's a book. Let's launch it. They learn about fonts. They learn, and every year, every time I do this, they come up with something more creative, like the book trailer this year, and so much of the social media. Everything you are seeing in the world, I'm just cheering on. They do an amazing job of coming up with new ways to reach readers. And so we will definitely do this again. I'm game. Are you game, Wendy?
I'm game. I'm
Okay.
game, and I'm going to echo that. You know, it would require a great editor of poetry to add that third genre. But bring it.
Well,
That sounds like an amazing opportunity for a woman writer in DC. It's not me, like I said, I'm not a poet, and I know it.
that was good.
I do what I can.
Hildy asked about, hi Hildy. Hildy asked about more readings, and there are 2 more scheduled, and I actually just got word this morning that the Inner Loop is going to schedule a Just Furious Gravity. I've basically been sending out emails to everyone I know, begging them and saying, you know what you need? You need a Furious Gravity reading. And so, and I know Wendy has reached out to a few too, and so there will be more readings. There's a Readings on the Pike is May 14th. That's the same day I'll actually be on the Kojo Nandi show talking about you all. And then May 10th, which is Mother's Day at 3 p.m. is our reading Politics and Prose Live. So make sure you get tickets to that so that you can get.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you,
Melissa,
Oh,
Wendy,
thank you.
Margaret, Zach. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Romperoon. Hello, Beth. Hello, Donna. Anyway, thank you all. This was fantastic. It was just buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. And if you've read a book, buy another.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.